The engine taken from my friend's car has a displacement of 500cc and an output of 60 horsepower. So I'm using it as the power source for the go-kart. I cut the steel pipes to the right size using a bandsaw for making the chassis frame, and then I use a hydraulic pipe bender to create the angles. I flip it over and bend the ends to create two pieces. First, I place these two pieces on a large platform for easier handling. Then I position them properly and use the pipe bender to make a crossbeam that bends at both ends. Position it correctly and align it with the vertical pipes. First, do some temporary spot welding to secure the round pipes. Cut notches at both ends so they can fit tightly with the vertical pipes on either side. Measure the front crossbeam and weld it in place. Using a gunner to help tilt it at a certain angle, you can keep the front and rear wheels at the same height and secure them with spot welding. Position the front wheel installation pipe and the pedal installation pipe. Continue adding pipes to reinforce the overall structure of the chassis. Digger didn't use steel pipes to make the rear axle. Instead, he bought 3 go-kart specific bearing seats. He measured the dimensions and used a bandsaw to cut 2 pieces of steel plate, bringing them together and spot welding them to secure their position. He made a large opening in the middle and drilled 6 small holes on each side. First, use an angle grinder to align the hole diameter, cut one side open, and then use a sandbag machine to grind off the welds, splitting it into 2 pieces. Install it onto the bearing seat with 1 piece on each side and tighten the nuts. Then seal this side off and temporarily spot weld it to secure it in place. Then carefully weld the outer shell and polish off the ugly weld scars. Make an outer shell for each bearing and install them separately. Tighten the fixing screws, then turn the elbow lever over to the rear end of the chassis and align the bearing seat. Use a tape measure to cut the distance between the 2 ends of the pipe to make sure it is consistent. Clamp it firmly and spot weld the fixing rods. Now let's lift the engine up and position it properly, adding pipes to secure the engine in place. I took 2 pieces of irregular plates and used screws to attach 1 piece to each of the 2 square plates, securing them together. I placed this assembly underneath to connect the 2 sides of the irregular plates at the rear frame, adding a small triangle for support and a small long strip at the front. This setup not only secures the engine, but also serves as a battery compartment. Loosen the screws and take it down, then weld it securely in place continuously. The advertising tower isn't secured enough yet, so I'm adding more pipes on both sides of the engine and at the back to fix the small steel plates to the engine, along with an additional crossbar to make it sturdier. Move forward a bit and replace it with a U-shaped key. I made a U-shaped pipe clamp and a crossbeam, carefully welding them securely and placing them in the middle. Once the angle is set, I weld it in place. For the steering column installation, I draw out the front wheel assembly, insert the screws, and tighten the nuts, then install the steering bushings. The steering column is pushed in, and I connect the steering's eye rod. We also need to secure a bearing seat under the steering column and weld it firmly. Let's install the steering wheel and give it a try. It's very comfortable. The only problem is that you didn't prepare the homemade steel plate accessories for the fiberglass seat and install them on the bottom and backrest. It's convenient to weld it to the chassis, so I brought it over and adjusted its position, welding a small round pipe at the front. Spray water to cool it down promptly. The same goes for the amount. After welding, spray water immediately to avoid damaging the seat. Adding a diagonal brace makes it even more stable. And this way, it stays cool. All removed. This engine is really heavy. It was almost too uncomfortable. Earlier, everything was temporarily fixed with spot welding. Now the chassis is being carefully and continuously welded securely. After playing around all day, it looks very nice. Now, everything that needs to be installed is being put back in place. The rear flange is matched with the keyboard, the screw marks are aligned, the hole positions are drilled out, then the threads are prepared. A section of the sleeve is removed and spot welded at the joint for positioning. After drilling the holes, the weld points are ground off, the sleeve is removed, and a groove is created to wrap the keyboard. Tighten the fixing screws, fit it onto the rear axle, then fit the brake disc in place. Fit the bearing seat into the pre-reserved position at the beginning. Tighten the fixed screws, wrap fiber around both ends, and tighten the old screws to adjust the position of the front disc, aligning it with the engine gear, and lock the screws in place. Place the chain in and measure the length. Install the 2 small front components, and ensure they are sprayed with room liquid. Avoid central accessory entanglement. No problem. Spray the front wheel brake disc with room liquid. As well, weld the installation components of the front bumper properly. Take a screw to secure the throttle and automatic pedal. Adding a reset pull spring makes it perfect. Now insert the bumper. Tighten the fixing screws at the bottom and top. Install the brake control linkage fixed pedal and test the travel. It feels about right. The gear shift lever is arranged on the right side of the seat for convenience. Though it's a bit more complicated, add a horizontal bar in the middle, then vertical bars at both ends, bend it into a Z shape, place it properly, and tighten the fixing screws. The fuel tank mounting bracket is welded to the left side of the engine. After installing the fuel tank, add a bend pipe at the back to stabilize the engine. Fit the hub with locking screws for secure fastening. No issues. Then separately install slick tires, suitable for road driving, secure the clutch cable in place. The other end is installed below the steering wheel, leaning slightly to the left for easier handling. After installing the ignition coil, secure the radiator with tight screws, add a bracket on the side, and install a side box. This not only enhances safety and aesthetics, but also can be used to hide wiring. Add a skid plate underneath. To prevent mud and dirt from splashing onto the rider while driving, connect the fuel line to the brake pump and calipers. Add a fairing to the front of the vehicle and tighten the screws to secure it. Ensure it is properly installed on the vehicle's surface as well. Finally, place the battery inside and connect the positive and negative terminals. With that, the lightweight Q is complete. A small-bodied, powerful, high-displacement, and visually appealing go-kart is finished. Start it up first and enter the enjoyable test drive phase. Wow, this little machine is really nice. I'll say it's the comfortable Buster version. It's so thrilling.